Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 550XP Mark II chainsaw. Customer complaint is that he can't get the thing started. Taking a look inside the fuel tank. I mean, initially things look decent in there. Let's pour this fuel out and see what we actually have. Color of the fuel looks good as far as age and oil quantity, and there was no water in the bottom of the tank, so we're good there. I'm going to fish the fuel filter out. Fuel filter looks like it's in good shape, although this saw should have a blue fuel filter on it, which is a smaller micron filter than the orange ones. Trying to pressurize the fuel line. I want to put 10 pounds of pressure on here. Pump it up to 10. If it sits there for a minute, then the fuel line is good and the carburetor is tight. So it passed that test. Just going to put the cap back on here. So this saw looks like it's been worked. I think it has, if I remember right, it had like 75 hours on it. But it's still under warranty. So when I do warranty work, or at least I work on saws that are under warranty, and I suspect that there could be a potential claim, I start taking pictures. When I go to submit a warranty claim, Husqvarna asks for a lot of pictures, including one of them looking down the throat of the intake. You know, because if we're talking about dirt ingestion, we need to know what that looked like. We also potentially, if we're going to tear the saw down, and you know you're doing warranty work, get a picture of the saw intact before you tear it apart. One thing they'll ask for is general condition of the saw. So I just discovered what's actually going on here. Take a close look at this spark arrestor screen. You see how it's kind of plugged up? Well, that material that's kind of plugging it up is, well, I'm not going to tell you yet what it is. Let me know down in the comments if you know what it is. We're going to dig into this a little bit deeper. I did connect this saw to the computer to look for error codes on it, and there were no error codes. It's a little dirty underneath here. Nothing crazy. I'm checking the play in that bearing on the end of the crank. On the end of the crank. And I'm not really feeling any play. There is a hint here, though, that you can't really see in this picture. And we'll get to that as well. So I'm pointing at the flywheel. And at this point here, I've decided that I'm going to tear this thing down a little bit and pressure test it. And the reason I would pressure test it is because I suspect that there's an air leak. Now, even though I didn't see any scoring in the cylinder, that stuff that we saw in the muffler, that was a big clue for me, so I know which direction I'm moving on this repair. We're just going to clean up a little bit of schmutz here. Get this muffler pulled off. It'll give us an opportunity to take a better look at the condition of the piston and cylinder. These newer saws have a little different style bolts on the muffler. These bottom two bolts are Nice and long. I don't know that they're going to come loose. They go deep into the crankcase. Take a look at this bolt. Good. Well, no, it's hidden. Maybe this one you'll be able to see. Pretty good sized bolt on the bottom of that muffler compared to what we used to have. These are long-winded bolts as well. Alright, let's see what we got here on the muffler. Here's a closer look at that spark arrestor screen. So that material in there is actually what's left of the plastic cage in the crank bearing. And really, all I have to do now is figure out which side it is. And for warranty purposes, I'll need to get a lot of pictures. And I'll need to figure out what actually happened or why it happened. One thing they also asked for is a compression test. And I forgot to do this before I pulled the starter off. So that's why I put the starter back on. We'll get that number for them. Not that it really matters in this case, but they're the ones footing the bill, so if they want that number, then I'll give it to them. So let's see what we got. £145. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good. So the cylinder looked clean, good compression, nothing wrong on the top end. I have no error codes about an air leak or anything like that. But I do have a failed crank bearing because I see the cage in the spark arrestor screen. So it probably happened really fast. Too fast to wreck the engine, too fast to store an error code. But now I want to pressure test this thing and confirm that I have an air leak. Because just because I got a bearing out doesn't 100% mean I have an air leak. Although it's been a long time since I've seen one that had a good seal yet after having a cage from a bearing found in the spark arrestor screen. So to pressure test a saw, we need to seal it. That's why we put a plate over where the muffler used to be. The adapter that I threaded into the spark plug hole, that's going to be where I put air in or pull a vacuum from. I need to pull the carburetor off and seal this end as well. There's two long screws that hold it in place, go through the air filter holder. A couple of saddles that I had removed there. Wiring harness. A fuel line. The return to tank from the purge bulb line. Get that air filter holder out of the way. Here's our throttle cable. That's disconnected. Our main fuel line coming from the tank. Pop that off of there. There's a couple of tabs that come from the intake boot or insulation wall and kind of lock the carburetor in place. So I just move them tabs and then I can pop that carb off of there. Now I have to find the adapters for the intake side. There's two little plugs and a plate. So we'll pop the little plugs into the holes on the bottom, the secondary throttle holes, and then install this block off plate on the main intake. You'll notice that there's a pin in this plate. That pin goes into the pulse hole. On older units, it didn't have that pin there, and the pulse hole was in a different place. So we'll screw that down. Now our intake should be sealed. We're going to try to put 7 pounds of air in here, and you can see we're not having a lot of luck. So there is a major air leak in here. Just checking my gauge to make sure that it was working, because that's a pretty good sized leak. I want to pop the flywheel off of here and take a look at the crank seal on this side. I mean, I got to start one side or the other. And there's some evidence that tells me that the problem is on this side, and I'll show you that in a minute. So we're just going to use the old smack it with a hammer trick and get that flywheel off of here. But if you take a close look, it's kind of hard to see in this video, but that magnet has been rubbing on the ignition coil. Well, that usually only happens when the bearing's out, or you have a loose ignition coil module. And in this case, it's because we have a bearing out, I'm sure. So there's a protective washer on here. I need to get this out of the way so I can look at my crank seal. And I just got to pry it off of here. It's just kind of a press fit. So there's our bearing. I mean, the seal's in there. Everything looks normal. I don't see any problems with the seal. So I'm going to put some Mr. Bubbles on there and try and pump it up. Wow. But when I'm pumping it, you can actually see the seal moving. So the seal is damaged. I'm going to pop that seal out and take a close look at the bearing. I suspect what we're going to find is that there's no cage left, because we saw it in the spark arrestor screen. I'll give you a closer look at this here. So there you have it. If you know what you're looking at, you know that's jacked up. If you don't know what you're looking at, those bearings, those balls, are supposed to be evenly spaced all the way around that cage, but the cage is gone and the balls are just randomly jammed in there. So the bearing failed. You know, I don't know what the official reason is for some of these bearings failing, but this one has, and we're going to submit a warranty claim. And in part 2 of this video, whenever that happens, I'll show you what Husky's answer was to the warranty status of this saw. So that's all I'm going to have for you in the Husqvarna 550XP Mark II that wouldn't start. Thanks for watching. Later.